should start. We are on?
No. Good afternoon, and welcome to this last session of the conference. My name is Dinesh Kulkarni, and I'm with Microsoft. I'm on the mobile services team as part of the overall Azure team. And here's my co-presenter.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for sticking up with us. My name is Eugenio Pace. I'm the founder of Auth0. We are an identity management company, and our goal is to make identity management really simple, as you will see.
Great. Thanks, Eugenio. First, let me have a show of hands. How many of you know about mobile services? How many of you have heard about it? OK, almost everybody. Good. We have 8 other sessions, so there's plenty of material around. How many of you have actually built an application or two with mobile services? Fair bit. That's good. How many of you target sort of the consumer as your user, games or other consumer apps? A handful. Are the rest enterprise customers? OK, that's good. All right, so we've got a good mix, and we'll try to cover both the angles here in this talk. Just in terms of preliminaries, this is about specifically identity in mobile services. This is not a general identity talk. So I won't be covering Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and those kinds of things. At the same time, this is not a general mobile services talk, so I won't be covering the full gamut of mobile services features, though I will provide some basic introduction so you can see identity in perspective. Getting into the thick of things, the basic agenda is we'll have a brief introduction, get into authentication demo. From then on, we'll make a segue into custom identity. And at that point, my co-presenter, Eugenio, will come here and talk about how Auth0 is extending that story further to Active Directory on-premise and third-party providers that they add to our story. After that, I'll briefly touch upon the user story that extends authentication beyond the basics. Then if you have time, we'll get into the do's and don'ts, some of the common things that we've seen through tens of thousands of services that people have built and given us feedback on. And then we'll summarize and call it a day. Please do fill out the surveys. I know it's a small number of people, but it really helps everybody to understand what works and what does not work for you. So we'd be really thankful if you could fill out that survey sometime today. If you do it right here, that would be great. If not, later on as well. And there is, I'm told, a mystery prize and a drawing as well for filling out that survey. So there you go. You guys are a dedicated bunch, and I really appreciate you sticking around for the very last session. So let's start with the overall story here. Mobile services, as you know, is about building mobile applications. They can be on any of the multiple client platforms. We have SDKs today for these and some other platforms as well. Windows 8, iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and general HTML5. Because of portable library usage, you can also use it on normal .NET client if you're so interested. These devices have your applications. They talk to an API, which is backed by a mobile service. The mobile service itself provides a set of functionality. Identity is the one we'll talk about. There are others like data and logic behind it, scripts, push notifications with different push services, and scheduler. I'll be only covering identity, and I won't really get into the others, though in the flow of things, you'll also see different ways of handling custom logic for handling identity. The overall principle behind mobile services and identity in mobile services as well is to have simplicity as the first goal, to make the simple scenario really easy, and at the same time have the enablement. So sort of you can think of it as a couple of Lego blocks put together, really simple to get going, and then if you really want to build big castles, you have that option as well. Some of you might know Mr. Identity Vittorio, who's been doing Active Directory and so on for years and years, and here he walks in just in time. Mobile developers and identity have some kind of a difficult relationship that is embodied in this little picture. It's sometimes really a struggle because the goal of the mobile application developer is to provide the best user experience possible. The purpose of the overall identity service is to make sure that it's secure. There are all kinds of checks and balances and gates, which often get in the way of the usability of the app. And so it is hard, but we'll see how the story evolves as we write little code. So let's start with the basic authentication capabilities. What I'm going to do here is start from scratch and create a mobile service. And once I create the mobile service, we'll add basic authentication to it. Create a new service. For that, I'll pick a name. Let's call it build. Today's date is 28, so I'm pretty sure there is no service with that name. That looks like it works. All right, so it'll go ahead and create a service for me. Now, once that mobile service is created, I'll go through all the steps from scratch, and effectively we'll have a mobile service with basic authentication capabilities. The way the basic identity pieces work is that we've taken care of supporting Facebook, Twitter, Google ID, Microsoft ID, etc. pretty much out of the box. It's a fairly simple experience. Then it's possible to add more things. And today, I'll go through Twitter authentication first, and after that, I'll cover custom identity, going through sort of multiple steps. So let's take this service, newly created. And for now, I'm going to pick Windows Store app, and I want to create a new app. So let's first create a table. This is the famous to-do items application because the world needs some more. There are so many things to do in the world, and we are really short of things to do, or apps to track to-do items. I'll save these. This provides a pre-canned project for those who've already built applications. You already know what it does. Okay. It'll give me a basic project ready with a simple UI, and I'll take that project and add some more authentication capabilities to it. I just changed the settings with my font. Looks like it's taking a little time for VS to come back, and there it is. Okay. So here in Solution Explorer, I've got the basic pieces of the project ready. Let's look at the main code file here. I have this is sort of my main project here. Let's go ahead and run it. I think I need to just duplicate my display here. Okay. So I've got a basic to-do item here. So I'll say introduce mobile services. That's my first task. I'll create a couple more. And let's say create a quick start app. Okay. So I've got a basic app running here. And what I want to do now is look at what kind of data it's created and point out that there is really more work to do. So here in this, I'll go to Data tab, browse my to-do items table. I've got a few records created here, but there's no notion of any user or anything here. So before I go and add any notion of user, let me first work on the authentication piece. So let's get back to VS, and in here, what I want to do here now is provide some sort of basic user experience to log in. So I'll start with a pop-up kind of experience here. So using windows.ui.popups. And now I'll add a little bit of code here. Let's see. At the end, I'm going to add a method for authentication that I've created a little snippet for, so you don't have to watch me type and make mistakes while typing. So what I have here is I have an authenticate method, and what it's going to do is it's going to go to Twitter. I'm going to pick Twitter as my authentication vehicle, and it's going to require that because that's the basic premise, that unless the user logs in, the user is not going to see anything. So let me put in, I've got this method ready here. Let me add a call to this method in the right place. So here on navigator to, what I want to do is after the refresh to do items, I'll call authenticate, and this needs to be async. Okay. So I've got the basic plumbing here. At the same time, I also need to tell Twitter that I've got a new app, because this is a brand new app that I've created, and that I want to use Twitter's authentication mechanism for this app. So I'll go to Twitter. I'll create a new application here. I've already logged into the dev portal that Twitter has. And Twitter will ask for a few basic pieces of information. So let's go and get those pieces of information ready. Here they'll expect a URL. So let's go to dashboard and have our app URL ready, because this is what they need to know. Looks like Twitter is still churning on this one. So meanwhile, I'll describe the next few pieces here. I'll also set up the source control, because we're going to go ahead and add some more code. So let's get that going. And that will give Twitter time to bring up its portal. Let's call it the build identity with, let's call it the build identity demo. The description is build talk about mobile services. I'll put the same one, my app URL here. I'll accept theirs. And create the application. Once I create the application, I'll get some pieces of information from Twitter that I need to put back in, and those are the ones that will allow mobile services to effectively have a handshake, a two-legged OAuth handshake with Twitter, and make sure that we have the right, when you sign the token, we have confidence in the credentials that, or the claims that we are passing on. While it's doing that, let me also set up the rest of the environment for Git. I just created the source code, source control. Let's see if this comes back quickly enough. Okay, it's back. Didn't like it for some reason. Let's see what happened here. For some reason, Twitter seems to be slow from here. couldn't resolve host name. Let's see. If not, then I'll switch to an existing one that I've already created. Now I'll show you what the code is. Okay, that's better. Give it a few more seconds. If not, then I'll switch to a pre-canned app or the ready application that I've already done. Okay, looks like this is taking a bit too long, and it's not coming back. All right, I'll just go back to the one that I did this morning, and I'll show you the kind of code experience that's involved in it. Okay. This is, instead of that, let's see here. Sometimes it helps to just redo this. Okay, looks like Twitter is not too happy today. Let's go through this one here in a different application here, for which I have all the code ready. This app has been pre-registered with Twitter, so I'll just go use that. But I'll go through the code experience here. So this is a similar app that I had, similar mobile service that I had created. And what I'm going to do here is put it to another place, start from scratch. Except this one is registered, so I don't have to wait for Twitter at all. All right, I'll do the same steps using windows.ui. Pop-ups. Go to the toolbox and get the authentication code here. Okay, so this is the code that I want. Paste into this one. Sorry, not that one. Okay, and then do a refresh to do items, and here I'll add await authenticate. And let's go and do that. I'll close this old application here. run it on local machine instead. So what happens is, because I added that call to authenticate in the on navigated to, the first thing it does, it now connects to Twitter. Okay, looks like Twitter doesn't even want to connect today. All the links to Azure are intact, so I'm assuming it's not a network problem, but a problem connecting to Twitter. So what I'm going to do instead is switch to the next part, so we can go through the next piece of it. The overall, for Twitter or Facebook, the overall flow is you go from device to any of these identity providers, and mobile service together, they do a OAuth type of dance. So the credentials go from the device straight to the providers, so the password is never seen by mobile services. The providers in turn provide an auth token that mobile services gets, and that auth token then leads to an identity. So basically, mobile service takes the auth token, signs a JSON web token, a JOT, and that JOT is what is used as a proof of identity. Using that proof of identity, you can get additional resources. For example, Facebook's case, it could be graph access. In other cases, whatever additional services that are available. There's also a client flow. If you're using a client SDK like Windows or Microsoft IDE SDK on Windows, or Facebook SDK on iOS, at that point, your client can directly talk to the provider, get an auth token, then submit that auth token to mobile services, and get all the right identity pieces set up. Those are sort of the basic pieces that are available. So we started out with the story that identity is hard. Sorry, I couldn't go through the whole Twitter from scratch, but those are the things that are supported out of the box. And I'll try later on if Twitter comes back again. But now I want to show you something that is new that you haven't seen before, which is custom identity. And that custom identity, thankfully, is not beholden to having Twitter accessible. This is going to involve just mobile services code. And so for that, I'll go back to my previous demo. And for this one, I don't need this authenticate method anymore. I'll leave that in for now, but I don't need a call to authenticate, so I'll take that out. And here, what I'm going to do instead is have my own custom UI. And for custom identity, what I want to do is I want to ask user for registration for the login ID and password. And there are many reasons why you would want to do that. One of the primary reasons is you want the customer to start having a more sort of personal interaction with your app. You want to have a personalization experience for the user and so on. So for that, you would often want to really have your own registration, your own mechanism for users, and track additional pieces of information, profile, and so on for the user. What I'm going to do here is quickly add one more control to XAML. For those of you who might not have heard about it, I can add, I have this basic XAML that you saw the form for, but instead of this normal one, what I can do is I can add to it a pop-up control. I've got the basic piece of code here. What it does is it's just setting up a pop-up control with the login ID and button and so on, and I'll show you in a few minutes what the UI looks like. And then I have a few buttons for logging in and registering. These are the buttons here, login and register. And I'll add a little bit of code to handle the events for clicking of those buttons. It's that simple. There's really not a whole lot more to it. I have this authenticate, and here I can add. Basically, what I need is I need to handle the login and register events. So let's add the user registration first, and I'll explain what it does. I have a basic click handler for the user registration process. All it does is it closes the pop-up and calls the register user method. The register user method, in turn, takes the user ID and password from the UI, and then it goes and calls a corresponding custom API on mobile services. That's sort of the basic setup. Before I run this, let me just view it, because I haven't really done any work in mobile service yet. What I do need to do is add using statements at the top, and the JSON serializer that we use is the Newtonsoft one. And I'm going to use that for passing in the parameters for calling the mobile services API. And I'm also going to use the link capabilities of JSON object, so I'm adding those two. Let's look at the UI first, and then we'll go ahead and build the server side pieces. Looks like I don't need that. Oh, I did forget to make one more change here. I do need to name the grid. Oh, I didn't put that one. I've added the register user one, and someone pointed out I need to add the other one as well. So let's add the similar code for login. Again, the handler is the same, which is it closes the pop-up and just calls the login user. What I see now is this basic UI. I won't go and click right now because I haven't set up the rest of the server side machinery, but this is a small modification to my application. So let's now go look at the server side of things. For server side, what I'm going to do is a few things. I set up my source control, so I'm going to copy a few files, some existing methods, use those methods to basically handle the registration and login pieces. I have the new one here. Oh. This is not working. Okay, I need to get the font size fixed. Okay. Just double check that it's the setup is all complete. Okay. So here I have set it up before. I had earlier gone to the dashboard and set it up, but now I can go to the configure tab and look at all the necessary pieces of information for my source control. What I need is the Git URL to set up my repo. Copy that one and go to my Git prompt. Here. Git clone of that, and it will create a copy of basically a basic structure that will tell me where I can put the scripts. And this is my basic server-side infrastructure. I could have done all that coding in Portal as well. It wants to get the basic credentials, and once it's got those, it's going to create a basic folder structure for custom APIs and shared code and so on. I can do a tree view here, in fact. I can see that I've got a basic service, API, scheduler, shared, and all those scripts set up. I'll copy over a few scripts that I have ready. What I want is I want login. I need the service, the same path basically, API, copy that, and then register as well. While we are at it, I'll copy a few others that I might need. Okay. And likewise, I'm going to go into the shared folder and get some utilities. Now, for creating JWT tokens and so on, I need to be able to sign them. And in order to sign them, I need some capabilities for signing tokens. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to create a little one for signing JWT tokens. And that's what I have right now. Now I'll add those scripts. So I'll do a git add. I'll do the same thing for my APIs as well. These are custom APIs. And I'll show you the code in a moment. Do a git add register as well. Add all the methods here. And do a git commit with a message. These are the initial scripts. Okay, now my environment is set up. Now I can do a push from local environment to remote. So git push origin to master. This will take the scripts and copy them over to the server. It's basically a simple deployment, one line code that does that. So meanwhile, let's go and look at the client code while this git push is happening. Okay, it's all done already. So now I have the infrastructure ready. Let's go and see in the portal what I see for scripts. If I go to the API folder, here now I'll see a set of scripts for login and register user. Let's not worry about the login or register device for now. But there is a login and there's a register user scripts. And these scripts are meant to do basically the initial registration and login. Let's look at the register user script, and then we'll come back and actually do the registration. What I do here in the register user script is I take the input, which the request, the post request in the body has the input user and the password. Once I verify that, then I call a little utility to actually hash this password and store it, because obviously you don't want to store passwords in clear text. So I'll create a hashed password or hashed version of the password, and then I'll go into a user table and add that. But in order to do that, I do need a table created. So let's go ahead and create that first. So in the data folder, I'll create a And for this one, I don't want anybody to have access to it, because this is not really meant for everybody to handle. This is really meant for scripts and admins. So I'll go and change it to scripts and admins. All accesses are now restricted. In general, the app key is not a secret. App key is just an identification of the app, whereas the master key that you have is actually a secret. So that's the one that you should protect. And what I do need to do is, when I copied over the scripts, I also had a master key in it, so I need to change the master key. And what I'm going to do is just go and do that. So I'll go into configure, manage keys. Now this is just a demo, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it in front of people. And go into here, into my shared folder, where I create a JOT token, and I'm going to go make that small change. So the key it uses maps to this particular service and not some other old service. And since I'd forgotten to make that one small change, I need to make sure that I do a git push on that one. Git commit, fixed master key, and then I'll have my master key updated as well. So meanwhile, I'll have the user table ready as well here. So what I see here is user table is empty. I have some records in to do item, but nothing in the user table. So let's go ahead and do one more thing. Let's for this to do item, let's start tracking the users. So what I'm going to do is, for inserts, I'm going to create one more column here. So each item now has a owner, or who created that one. What I'm doing is I'm taking a row and essentially augmenting it with one extra column. Save that. Okay. So meanwhile, my git push is done, and I'm ready to actually run the app. Okay. Okay, let's do this. All right. So here, let's run this. And before I even run that, let's do one thing. Let me show you a few details here. So in the register user, I can actually take a look at what I'm sending over the wire and what I'm getting back. Let me do that. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to pick something that is fairly simple. And in fact, I'm going to show you here in ClearTest. Oh. Okay. Looks like I didn't do the right thing there. Oh. Let's go back, and it's always good to have the ability to debug. even if it's in the form of logs. Oh. No, they're not set up yet. Here are the 3 APIs that I have, and these should have been, yeah, that's the step that is missing, permissions. And I don't want the other permissions, but for the post, I do want anybody with an application key to be able to post for this one. That's one. Okay. Now, with that out of the way, I can actually do the login. Let's do that again. I'm going to use a very obvious password for that. Oh, I must have given the wrong input. Let's go and make sure in the logs. Okay, so just to show you what is going on here, it's giving me the login information. These are the entry details, and I'll take that and create a token and send that back. That is the basic purpose here. Sorry, not the login one, the register user one. In the register one, I'm taking this, I'm adding the basic capability of the user information to it. What is the input user, the hash password, storing that, and then after that, I'm returning basically a signed token. That's sort of the flow here. Let's go and check why this is not doing what it's supposed to do in a few minutes. That's always using the register user, which is the correct one, which is the login request. And the login user has the correct one as well. This is the custom API that I call here, register user. Let's go ahead and debug that in a few seconds if you can figure that out. Okay, let's see. Maybe that was the problem. Let's go through that. You might have caught the right one. Okay. Register. And here the request that I have, it's basically it's got, now obviously this is a demo, that's why I'm showing you a password that doesn't make sense, because I wouldn't be showing it. Let's take the next step. Sorry about that. Okay, what I'm going to do at this point is actually go back to the completed one and show you instead. I'll walk you through the code a bit and hand it over to Eugenio at that point. Let's do let's do the register user here, and then do the same thing. Second user at contoso.com. Let's see, and I'll register here. And for registration here, the request I've sent is again the password and other things I entered. Now I'll run the next one, and what I get back here now is the login result. And the login result now has this additional information that I can use, which has the user ID that came back and the authentication token and so on. It's basically the same exact script that I copied over, and that is the signed token that you get back. That is basically how it works. I won't go into details in the interest of time further, but I'll show you one more part of it, which is, let's complete this one, and I get the required data here, and I'm logged in at this point. And in fact, I can switch over to this particular one, and I can see that. Let's in fact run one more thing on it. Let's refresh the data, and when I refresh the data, it will only, there is no data corresponding to this user. So my item I'll add as a logged in user. Okay, and so now I can switch over here and show you what actually it contains. One of the headers that it added when I did the authentication was the XZoomo auth header that has the token in it. That is the JWT, the JSON Web Token, and that was signed using my master key, which is secret as a developer, that I only own it, and that's the one that I used. Another thing that it does is, if I rerun that, now I can also show you one more thing here quickly, which is I can also skip login. Very often it's beneficial to not require registration. You want an anonymous experience, but at the same time you want the ability to track the data so that later on, if the user decides to register, their data is appropriately tagged. Imagine a game or imagine any kind of app where the user doesn't want a barrier, they're not willing to give you Facebook ID or register for your service. You can say skip login. They still have something that they can use, and that gets tagged, and you can later on associate a registration ID with that. With that, I'll hand over to Eugenio. Switch to screens.
Where's it? Let's skip all this. So any Auth0 users in the crowd? I can't see anything. If you are there, we love you. If you're not, you should. So let's go forward here. The secret or the key for identity extensibility in mobile services is this. You saw that opaque thing that Dinesh was sending in one of the headers, but if you open that app, it's actually base64 encoded. You will see there's three pieces into that thing. One is two segments, a header, the token itself with some claims, and a signature. So if you are able to craft this JSON Web Token somehow and send it to your requests into mobile services, you are open. You can go and do whatever you want. And that's essentially what we've done in Auth0. Auth0 it's a bridge between different identity systems, all of the social ones that you see there, Live ID, Twitter, the ones that come out of the box, but a few others, like LinkedIn and PayPal and others, but also all the enterprise ones. So if you have something like Active Directory or Google Apps or Office 365 or maybe some custom SQL-based authentication system with usernames and passwords, you can connect them all with us, and we will generate the JSON Web Token that Azure Mobile Services understands. We do two things. We do the token transformation, but we also do the protocol transition. So you can have any protocol in the lower side, and we will create the ones that is appropriate for your mobile services application. So consider this scenario. This is Fabricam. This is a company. They have Active Directory. They manage all the users, all the employees there, and they are building a line of business application with mobile services. So what they want is, John is a network user. They want to be able to log in into their Active Directory and then call the API in mobile services with that. Okay? So now I'm going to switch here. So for this, I have a very simple application. In fact, it only has a couple things. You can see that I didn't pass my designer exam. So I have like one login button, another login button that I'm going to show afterwards, 2 text boxes to show what's actually coming back and forth, and then a third button that I'm going to use to call my invoices API in mobile services. So when I click login, and this is of course all pre-wired through Fabricam's Active Directory. So when I click on login, this is our widget that comes up. And then out there, it's Fabricam's Active Directory. So if I type John password, and I sign in, I'm back. The first one is the access token to us. So this is the token that you can use to call Auth0 own API. The second one is a JSON Web Token that Auth0 gives you to call the mobile services. And the third one, this is here, is calling the invoices endpoint and saying that John at Fabricam has 23 invoices there for him. All right? So how does it work? Well, the first thing that you need is the mobile services master key, which is used to sign the JSON Web Token. That's the thing that you need to take from your dashboard in Azure Mobile Services, here in Manage Keys, the master key, and then enter into the Auth0 dashboard so we can use it to sign the token. So this is our dashboard. When you sign in into Auth0, you see this. When you create a new application, there's a bunch there that you can choose. One of them is a Windows Azure Mobile Services. And once you create that, you will get this configuration section. Well, all you need to do is enter that master key. You save, and you're done. And then on the code side, when I click on the button, on the login button, I'm calling this method here. I'm using this helper function, this helper class, Auth0 client. This is a very, very small helper class that we put together that just encapsulates all the HTTP requests that need to be sent from the device to Auth0 and back, right? We are passing a few parameters, like the tenant, who am I in Auth0, my client ID, this is the client ID of my account with Auth0, and a few other things. This one in particular is the one that identifies Fabricam with us. So that parameter in this demo is set up to fabricam.com. So what I'm saying is, please log me in to fabricam.com in this case. That's all I'm saying in the first sentence. Then in this one, what I'm done, this is essentially for those who are not familiar with Objective-C, that's a callback essentially that says, call me when you're done. Tell me whether you are authenticated, yes or no. And if you are, we are extracting the JSON Web Token from the client. Then when I click on invoices, all I'm doing is the usual settings for calling the mobile services client. So what I'm doing is taking the JSON Web Token that I'm getting from Auth0, putting it into the client object in the property, and then making a regular call as I would do, without Auth0. So here I'm reading all the invoices. If everything goes well, then I got this message saying that I got, X number of invoices there. All right? So, to recap, we had the account in Auth0, we had it pre-wired, configured with the Fabricam's Active Directory. We initiated the login. You saw the text box for username and password. That's a regular AD forms-based authentication, but those are Windows credentials. We authenticated with John in Fabricam and password. We got a SAML token back. So from those who are familiar with identity management, SAML tokens is another way of conveying information about the logged in user. And of course, mobile services does not understand SAML tokens. It understands JSON Web Tokens. In fact, a very specific format of those. There's a spec for that, which is the one that I showed in one of the first slides. We got that JSON Web Token back, and then we called the get invoices attaching that JSON Web Token. Now, for those of you who have done anything with AD or with identity management, you know that it's not completely accurate. Can someone point what's wrong? What's missing? Active Directory does not give you SAML tokens. You need a specific component in Windows to do that. And that's Active Directory Federation Services, which is what I'm really using. Right? So there's another component in there which is not shown here. But when I click login and that form appears with username and password, that's not AD. That's Active Directory Federation Services. And that's an additional thing that you need to deploy. A big number of companies use Active Directory, but a very small percentage of those use ADFS. What happens if you don't have ADFS? So there you have a couple options. One is to deploy Auth0 on premises. You can. We are a full spectrum service, so you can run as a service, or we can run on premises. That could be one option. The second option, which is probably very interesting as well, is to use Windows Azure Active Directory. And there's a component that was shipped not long ago, which is called DirSync. That's a directory synchronization tool that you install on premises. And it will synchronize your accounts in the on-premises Active Directory with your account in Windows Azure Active Directory. That's a replacement for ADFS that does not require much infrastructure on your data center. Okay? What happens if you want to connect with other things? So, coming back here. Doing that is actually fairly straightforward with our dashboard. If you go to, let's say you want to use LinkedIn and you want to use PayPal. I'm not going to try Twitter today, just in case. So LinkedIn is enabled. PayPal, it's enabled. Let's say GitHub, I'm going to enable it too. So these are all the identity providers, the social identity providers that I have set up for this account. There's a few others, like Azure Active Directory, Office 365, some of the ones that I mentioned originally. But now, instead of doing the login, which went directly into Fabricam, I'm going to log in with the widget, which is essentially telling Auth0 that I want to log in with anything that is available in Auth0 for this connection. So now you see, I have GitHub, I have Google, which was before, LinkedIn, and PayPal. So let's see, if I click PayPal, just for fun, and this is the time you need to close your eyes. I think it was that. Yes. Thank you very much. Got the same. Invoices. There's no invoices because I don't have any invoices in the back end with that specific PayPal account. Make sense? Cool. Thank you.